After discussing the cost of the investigation, Ethan agreed to it. Despite how unusual it was, he was glad it wasn't something he couldn't afford. After agreeing to the payment that she gave him, some objects were given by her to him to help with the investigation. First thing she gave him was a dream catcher. It closely resembled a spider web made of colorful string and even a few beads.
This is based on a classic dream catcher. It will catch any bad dreams and most importantly store them so that I can examine them with you and see if the nightmare matches your memory.
Red told him when she gave him the dream catcher. After that, she gave him a journal with a pen. The journal was a black moleskin, and the pen was a black ballpoint pen. While Ethan tried to figure out what was supernatural about this item, Red explained to him how it actually worked.
This is a journal. I want you to write down what you see as soon as it happens or as soon after it happens. The sooner the better to keep yourself from forgetting any important details. You'll be surprised what a note to yourself can say. Anything you find out of place. Not just what is odd, but why it's odd. For example, if you woke up with your room messed up, that can be odd. But it is odd but is it odd because you clean your room before you go to sleep, or is it odd because your room cleans itself while you sleep? Write it all down, what happened and why it's odd. It'll help put things together. And as time goes on, we will establish a pattern. The most important part is at the end of the week, we will meet again. However, if something happens, I want you to know it's okay to call me. Anytime it's an emergency, your call is going to go through. I promise you're not facing this alone.
After Ethan grabbed the items, they walked out of the cafe. When they walked out, Red immediately turned around and faced the door, her fists raised like she was about to get into a fight. Her breathing was hard and her shoulders were up. After a few moments, she started breathing calmly again. First, heavily, but then she calmed down after a few moments.
Sorry about that. I thought I heard someone follow us.
Red said, her shoulders now slumping. Ethan shrugged in response. Now that he was able to actually focus on it, he realized that the mural was on an endless concrete wall. It led into the void and looked as unbreakable as could be. Red walked up to the mural like she was walking through a normal sidewalk. A step where the mural was, and next thing Ethan knew, she was once again two-dimensional and waving at him to follow her. And Ethan followed. Another feeling of something brushing past him as he traveled through the path to his world. Now that he's actually done it a few times, he could say for sure that the veil was pushing past him and it had a feeling to it. It was like stepping into a warm house after a cold, long day. Familiar and even inviting. It was almost like Karen's coffee was a strange place, and now a familiar place was inviting him back and offering comfort to him. Now through the mural and back to his side, Ethan felt an invisible weight on his shoulders drop. Like it was an invisible string holding his shoulders up. Still though, even with the invisible string gone, Ethan still had to go home and see Sharon. This time, instead of a string holding up his shoulders, he felt a cold snake slither past his spine and nest in his liver. His next breath was not long and slow, it was short and quick. He felt a hand on his shoulder. Red was resting her hand on his shoulder, and she was also now wearing her shades. They were mirrored, and Ethan could see himself standing upside down in her glasses. A feeling of being completely upside down in a world that everyone kept telling him was normal. And here was a total stranger who was taking the time to make sure he felt comfortable.
If you feel uncomfortable going home to Sharon, I can go home with you. Just say hi. I'll just say hi real quick to her. That way you don't have to go and be alone. If I see anything right away, I'll tell you. And if something bad happens, I'll be right here.
Ethan nodded in response. Okay, let's do it. Do you, follow my car, or do you even have a car? Now it was Red's turn to look embarrassed. She awkwardly scratched her back while laughing.
Here. You're gonna find this funny, but I don't have my car right now. My big sister, who's a little fairy, borrowed it for a share my day video, and she would wind up crashing it after she ripped off the steering wheel while doing a shuffle.
Uh, what?
Well, it was more of a dance than a shuffle, but don't worry, she's alright. But the car isn't, and neither is the tree she crashed into.
Huh? What?
Her name is Fallen Grace. She's a year older than me, but she's less than a foot tall and she's a fairy. She makes money with social media, and while trying to record a video, she crashed my car.
No. I understand what you said. I'm just confused about why any of this is relevant to why you don't have a car right now.
Well, my car is broken right now. I got here through a path.
Okay, would you like to ride with me then? Would that be any better?
I think it will work best.
Now, with a plan in mind, Ethan led her to his car. After moving some papers to the back seat, they drove to his house. Ethan was lucky enough to get an apartment in the college district that requested student rates of rent without actually requiring him to be a student. Still, driving through the college district always felt surreal to Ethan. He would pass people his own age all the time, carrying book bags or chatting with friends or even just enjoying life. And he couldn't help but feel like he lost out on something important in his life. He never had the mind for college nor trade school, and he didn't connect well with others his own age. He always felt like there was an invisible cloud over his head that was keeping him in the dark and hidden from the others. And that was why he felt so elated when Sharon noticed him and then started dating him. For a while, it felt like the cloud wasn't important. It was always there, but it wasn't important. But once the nightmares started, it felt like the cloud was thundering and ready to hit him with lightning at any moment. He felt a warm hand on his arm once again.
Lost in memories?
Red asked him, her voice worried. Well, yeah, I didn't really have many friends before Sharon, and I didn't have much contact with my parents as soon as I turned 18. And by the time I was 19, they had moved away completely. And the last I heard of them, they were somewhere in the northern forest. And while I appreciate what you're doing for me, a large part of me is worried about losing Sharon forever, and potentially losing the one meant for me. Red sucked air between her teeth before she spoke to him again.
Ethan, I don't know everything in the world, but I do know a lot behind the veil. Love is a complicated thing, and life even more so. You're what, 21 right now? If you're unhappy with your life and want to do different things, you can. There isn't going to be one person made just for you. Someone who is the right one for you won't make you feel unsafe and fearful. They will make you feel strong and make you feel safe, and most importantly, make you feel brave. Your life doesn't end at 20. You may find love in your 30s, your 40s, or even 50s. You shouldn't have to convince yourself to hug a jellyfish because you might not find a different fish in the sea. You are being very brave and you will find someone better for you.
Ethan nodded, half listening, but it still felt like the snake that had nested in his liver was now not moving around so much. Finally, at his apartment, Ethan put the car in drive, and almost immediately, Sharon burst out of the apartment, almost yelling at Ethan. Where have you been? I've been worried sick for you since you left the doctors and didn't call me. And who is this bitch? Is she trying to take you away from me? Sharon asked, practically dragging Ethan out of the car, her hand gripping tightly on the burn on his arm. Ow, 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 that hurts. You don't need to drag me anywhere. This is Red Prince. She's helping investigate my nightmares, he explained. Red, at the time, was sitting in the passenger seat, this entire time practically frozen. But when Sharon grabbed him, she practically flung herself out of the car. When Ethan and Sharon were at the door, before Sharon could finish opening the door and drag Ethan inside, Red slammed the door shut.
Ethan, is this Sharon? Ethan?
Red asked, her voice almost shaking. Whether it was from anger or fear, Ethan couldn't quite tell. But Sharon definitely could infer. Yes, my name is Sharon, and I want to take my boyfriend home for dinner. Let us go, she said, trying to open the door, only for Red to slam it shut again.
Does the black moon howl?
Red asked, her voice steady but on edge, one hand holding the door closed and the other balled into a fist. Ethan was not sure what was happening, but he was not going to let it escalate. No, she wails. Why is that important? He answered, his head all fuzzy. Something was very not right here, but he couldn't quite explain what it was.
What are you?
Red asked Sharon. My name is Sharon Noctis. Now move before I call the cops, she said, still straining to open the door, as Red didn't let it budge a single inch.
Go ahead and call the police. If you don't have a phone, I'll lend you mine,
Red told her. They stood still for what felt like nearly a minute and a half while they simply stared at each other. Sharon facing towards Red and Red's glasses reflecting Sharon's face right back at her.
Ethan, I need you to focus really hard on what Sharon looks like.
Red pleaded with him. Ethan just shook his head for a moment. Sharon just looks like a beautiful woman, the most beautiful woman I've ever seen.
But what about her makes her a beautiful woman? Please, what is her smile like? What does her skin feel like? And what color are her eyes?
Red asked him, before Sharon slammed her hand against Red's mouth, now pressing her against the door. Red tried to continue to speak as Sharon held her against the door. Shut up, she growled at Red. But now Ethan thought about it for a moment. What did Sharon look like? Now that he was looking at her, really looking at her, and thinking about it, he realized things weren't adding up. Her arms were almost as long as her entire body. Her nails were long and sharp and looked more like the claws of a sloth. Her skin was cold and smooth, and her grip was so hard that his hand was already falling asleep. And her face. Oh gods, her face. Her mouth was always smiling, all of her teeth showing long and shark-like. Her nose was barely an indentation, and there was only smooth skull where her eyes should be. Sharon wasn't just an alien. She was always the alien. And for some reason, Ethan only sometimes recognized her as such. What are you? He asked, twisting his arm trying to break free from her. Instead, her grip only tightened and her blank face turned to him. He didn't think she could smile any wider, but she did. Ethan, it doesn't matter what I am. All that matters is I have you, and I have the snack, she said, her voice causing the ice snake in his body to move around more. Her teeth, mere inches away from his face, struck at his nose. His blood dripped down his face and his shirt as he fainted. While Ethan fainted on a heap on the ground, Sharon turned towards Red. This human was curious to her. She wasn't reacting to the toxin in her skin like she expected. Her teeth and tongue tasted the air near her, and the lack of fear pheromones indicating that Sharon wasn't lack of fear pheromones, unlike what she was expecting. She didn't seem like she was scared. She didn't even think it was possible for a human not to feel scared. How do you resist fear, human? She asked Red. There was much about humanity the Devourers didn't understand yet, but if she could understand this part, Maybe she could get an even more delicious fear from humanity's savory brains.
That's why you don't get it. That's why you don't get. I'm not human like he was. And what else you don't understand is that I'm not resisting fear. Just that not everyone freezes and appeases when afraid.
Red swung her fist at Sharon's elbow that was bracing against her. A blast of electrical energy radiated from Red's gloves, the glowing, shifting script running from her gloves up her body. Red words written in the witch's alphabet. Sharon let out a long scream when the electricity flowed through her body. Humans weren't supposed to have electric self-defense, but they also weren't supposed to see through telepathic illusions or even be able to challenge the Devourers either. Sharon felt movement in the air with her long, sensitive hair. She barely managed to scamper out of the way when Red smashed her foot where Sharon was laying just a moment ago. Another blast of esoteric energy, and cracks were left in the sidewalk. Red let out a grunt of effort from her attack as she turned to face her blind opponent. Her fists raised like a professional boxer, her pose strong and her eyes hidden behind her mirrored shades. Her thoughts were a murky mess to Sharon, but from what she could feel was very different from fear. But it still flowed with epinephrine and adrenaline. What Red was feeling? It was determination.
We don't always freeze and appease when we are afraid. Sometimes we fight so that our fears learn to take flight.
Red said, standing ready to fight with Ethan in the heap behind her, and Sharon the Devourer in front of her, on her hands and knees considering her next move. Before she decided that she had spent far too much time, energy, and venom on Ethan to let him go for this little bitch. Sharon's scream could be heard blocks away as she lunged towards Red Prince.